wait for the University of Toronto Scarborough with those that come with an idea to explore and bring it to my door. And so far, I've been able to operate quite well that way. And the university has stepped up to make that a reality. They've committed. We have a space, we have staff, we have budget, we have results that just speak for themselves.
Okay, Greg Graffam, you're here with us for episode number 100. We're celebrating a milestone together, as we usually have done. I really wanted you for episode 100 because just as I mentioned before we came on, the hub where all this kind of started, my personal entrepreneurial journey really started there in a professional sense, is itself a startup. It's an incubator at the University of Toronto, one of 13 in the University of Toronto, but the only one in University of Toronto at Scarborough. And Scarborough is only main source of incubation for startups. I always thought myself as someone who accidentally ran into the hub as like something always looking for resources, and this magical place just kind of appeared. And I really want to take today's episode to capture that story of how the hub as an incubator came to be, but also the story behind it, yours. So great, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. And it's quite the honor. And I do remember that day when you knocked on that door, and you were the first person to actually come to the hub when I had opened the doors and say, "Hey, is this like, is this the hub? Is this like a place I can like build a business?" And I said, "Well, yeah, absolutely." And we had a journey from that point on. So and that was like 7 years ago.
Definitely.
Amazingly, right? 7 years ago, but almost 8. But when it comes down to what I'd like to also convey is where we are right now in terms of what the hub is and what makes it distinct, what makes it different. Because that's part of the story is when you create a facility, when you create an incubator, when you create the hub, what do you create? And how then do you go about doing that? And the whole idea was to do something that would be created organically and have something that would work for the University of Toronto Scarborough, but also something that would be distinctive or unique in its own right. So, I mean, there are all sorts of models that are out there. And I had come from Waterloo at the time that I created the hub here. And yeah, sure, I mean, I knew some of the other models and I could have dropped that in or tried to. But there are reasons that may not have worked in terms of this particular environment. There are some things that need to be very done a certain way and with a certain heart in terms of things. So I remember, for example, having a conversation with the director of Creative Destruction Lab at the time when that was being set up. And hang on just a second. I don't know if you can hear background noise.
Yeah.
Or not. You can?
It's all right.
Yeah. Well, they're just heading downstairs. Dog and son and doggy treats. And there they go. Okay. So just that might be an awkward edit or not. But when you go to set up the hub, I wanted to create something that was unique in its own right. So where we've come, just to very fast forward to where we are and how we're different than things. When I created the hub, just before that, I had a conversation with the director at that point of Creative Destruction Lab. And this person had also created other incubators. And I was seeking some advice. And the advice was, bring them in, give them milestones. They don't hit the milestones, kick them out. Don't stop. Don't have a heart. Don't have a second thought about it. Move on. Get the next person in. Put your resources directly to bear to that matters. I remember leaving that conversation and going, no, that is not how this place is going to work.
Mm.
So part of it is to have the passion to care for each and every startup that comes in. Also, it's not to have it go through a set, like here's all the different things that you must do. Okay, now you're done, out you go. We don't work on that model.
Mm.
We created a community, and the community is one that has different facets to it. But the part of it is that people who have graduated from the hub are part of that. People who have gone through in the previous cohort are part of that. People who are coming in are part of that. And so it creates this space in which there's an awful lot of activity and vibe that's going on. Right now, there are 50 companies that are in the hub, 50. It's never been as packed as it's been before. And a lot of that is to do with what we're offering. So when you say about the start, and if we go back to that, the start is really attributed to a fellow by the name of Andrew Arafusin.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew is the Chief Administrative Officer of University of Toronto Scarborough. And back in around 2012, he was looking for how to get a facility in place for the students at the university, students at the campus, that would embrace entrepreneurship and startup and also this kind of co-curricular thing. He had the idea that it would be something that, well, we'll just see kind of where it goes. And he hired me and brought me from Waterloo and said, Gray, we're really not sure what this facility should be. We're really not sure if it will succeed and where and how, but we're going to be very excited to see you try. So with that, it was like, okay, I have a mandate to try to bring in a facility and make it work. So what are the things that are different about U of T Scarborough? Well, for one, it does not have an engineering school present on campus. So there's not a direct and immediate, like, boom, it's tied into the engineering. Another part of the mandate was to make it work for everyone, for all disciplines across the board. So for arts and social science, science and management, for having all of that kind of work. And at the time, it was like, here's a space that you can use. It's a space that's supposed to be a restaurant, but we haven't got a restaurant in there yet, and we're not sure if we will. But yeah, why don't you just, use this space and get it going? We'll throw some furniture in there, and you can kind of get things going. So the scramble was to figure out where to start, how to start. And it was under-resourced, but it was just that all that meant is that there was a challenge for me to find, well, how to connect the different pieces to make it all work. Luckily, there are a number of people that were strongly supportive all along the time in that phase of things. The dean at the time was very strongly in favor, and there was a lot of support for letting it try to find its way. So that's how the hub, in essence, took form. But one of the things that helped it to turn it into an incubator and its entrepreneurial space was when the Ontario government came up with, through the Centers of Excellence, came up with its program of sponsorship for entrepreneurship. I was part of that. I was tied in with the rest of the University of Toronto in terms of that, and we created a number of incubators at the different campuses, and the hub was recognized as one of them. And then it was a matter of, okay, now we have some money to operate. We have some money for doing student awards. We have some money for doing events. We have some money for getting some programming in place. And then let's get some things worked out for that. So we've had a competition each year, as you know, and it's been exciting. It's brought all sorts of attention in terms of within the university campus for students to take part. And it's been wonderful. It's brought people from all disciplines with all sorts of different ideas. So another aspect of its uniqueness is, how do you handle everything coming from all over the place? When it's somebody coming from the arts, somebody coming from bio, somebody coming from environmental science, somebody's coming, and management, computer science, and all coming in with some things that are very, very different. Some people want to create services, some people want to create apps, some people have a product they have in mind to create. So it's very, very diverse. And you have to be able to skate a number of different directions quite quickly with these different startups. So its uniqueness is in part its ability to handle that diversity. So one-on-one coaching is a huge part, as well as sort of here are the events, here are the guest speakers, here are the things that we're going to talk about. For example, today we had one that was just big on sales and scaling, and we want people to understand very early on that getting some revenue is probably a good idea to get some things moving. So we're focusing on scaling, we're focusing on sales, we're focusing on getting things moving that way. So there is a program: sales, marketing, scaling, business practices, best practices, team formation, stakeholder analysis of sorts. What are the basic principles for going from one stage to the next? What's the role of investment? How do you get investment if you're interested in going that route? What does it look like if you don't and you decide to bootstrap and do something that way? So I'm not sure if I've touched on the answer to your question enough. You asked, how did the hub come into being? A different answer to this is it came into being through each and every individual entrepreneur who crossed its threshold, because each entrepreneur who came, each founder, brought with them something that is added to the community, added to the facility, and added to the overall experience. So yes, it's something that, well, what do I bring to it? Fine. But it's also what each and every startup brings to it. And that's the difference. That's the difference that really makes a difference. For example, there's a fellow, came to the hub, wanted to do a startup with scooters. And I'm looking at him and I'm trying to figure out, number one, how does this kind of work? He wants to do a scooter company like Lime, but that's a big challenge. And I'm wondering, has he read something? Is he just kind of, wanting to get involved in this because it's very exciting and he likes the space and he likes scooters, or what? And it turns out, after I have a very brief meeting with him, that no, and indeed, he's been involved in this space. His family's been involved in this space since the very outset in terms of making scooters. He wanted to make his own and then launch that business to operate that, then bring it to, as he's done, to Kelowna, BC, to Calgary, to Ottawa, and then ramping it out and going from there. He's been extraordinarily successful. So part of it is to recognize, well, when each person comes in front, what is it about them that is that key advantage that really differentiates and makes it distinct for them, that they have a chance for success? So that's one instance. But with everyone, it's that kind of thing. I remember when you came to the hub and I asked you, what is it that you want to do? And you at the time had said, well, I've had this idea since high school and I want to create this particular experience online. I want to have it where we bring what is going on around us onto an app that we know we can get involved in the events that matter around us in real time and have them sort of disappear over time. And we get some other events and have everybody sort of get involved in a very active, living thing. You were very, very passionate about that. And it was through no fault of your own that that very technology was being worked on then by Snapchat. And they bought a company, and not yours, unfortunately, but they bought a company and made that all work. But you were extraordinarily passionate. That passion has been your foundation. That passion has led to the foundation and the forming of Lumex. And it's been any number of things that you're involved in the course of doing all that. So we have on in presence here a serial entrepreneur, someone who goes from, this, very, very excited about this, makes that successful or not, but in the case of the first one, but then goes to the next one. Well, okay, that one didn't work out, but let's bring this passion and these learning skills to this one. And you've been extraordinarily successful in terms of doing that. And that's part of it too, is to recognize that not everybody succeeds, but what you learn in the process is extraordinary for where it will take you. And some people, they find that, and one of the things that was being discussed this morning is how do people learn? And there's a thought about, well, we learn a little bit through our success, but we learn a lot through our failures. So the hub is a space where you can explore at an early stage. You can succeed or you can fail. And if you do fail, not a bad thing. Just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go forward again. But we try to make a number of success stories as we go. So I'm probably rambling a little bit, but help me out here. How do you see the story of the hub in terms of how you see it?
So one of my most distinct memories is walking into this building for the first time, not knowing what it is. This shiny building that showed up with like 15, 20-foot long, like ceilings. Everything looks brand new, bought amazing furniture inside, completely empty. And it says doors open, come on in, like, open door night. And I come in and I see this sign on the side of the building, and then on the wall inside saying the hub, Ideation and Experiential Learning Center. And at the time, I have no idea what that means. It just seems like fancy words, but it was something that's been stuck in my mind, always running my head. Ideation, experiential learning. What is experiential learning? Like I've never heard that. I know what ideation is, coming with ideas, but experiential learning through doing things. Like I knew what these words distinctly meant, but why it was on the side of the wall didn't mean. And it took me a few years, and it came to me in ways, and it perfectly describes what the hub is. It's literally on the wall. It's a place where you can ideate, come up with ideas, and learn through the application of them, to doing them. And the ideas I work on might evolve and change, but the whole point is to learn and develop at getting better at that. How to come up with ideas and deploy them into the world. And that's what I saw that as was, and that's what I got classical training from the hub is that companies, by essence, other than the legal framework and the products and the hardcore substance behind them, it's literally stories that you kind of deploy into the world to make an idea into reality. And one of the things I've always really appreciated about the hub was just the validation it provides, right? More than anything else, more than the training, more than anything. Here was this place where you can come in and do something that everyone else tells you is crazy, or telling you that might be wasting your time, or like, something that you should do on the side.
Let's take a look at this.
Yeah. And it's like, no, come on in. Here's a club of everyone who's doing some crazy stuff, who's taking a pause out of the rest of their life, who's putting like, double, triple the amount of hours that's healthy in a week into working on one particular thing, and they want to solve problems. And the fact is, everyone's doing that. They're coming from different backgrounds. They're working on different problems.
Right.
But the validation it gives that your stupid idea that's been bugging you, it's not completely useless. There could be some validity in it. So take the time to work on it. Right. And exactly what you said, like to be fair, like the hub and versus CDL. CDL is like an acceleration center where it's like, okay, here's something you refine. You have a business, accelerate it, move, right? And if you don't, you're out. You're kicked out. You got to keep up with certain traction. But the hub is like the gym. You go there and you get progressively better. Okay. Some people are further along. Some people are naturally more process to get stronger and fitter. Other people take some more time. But here was this common place you can come together and just work out. Work out.
Comparing it to a gym is just perfect. Yeah. Because you're right. I mean, we think about a gym. And some people go and they're really good and they're buffed and they can do all sorts of things, all sorts of presses, and they can do all that. Or they're a swimmer, they can do all these kinds of laps or whatever. And then the other people go to a gym and, gee, it's I haven't been making the progress I've wanted to make. It's taking me a little longer. And the hub is exactly that sort of experience. It's one of people work at their own pace. When you have students and when you have recent alumni, you have people with different capacity to do things at different pace. Students are doing a full course load. Their ability to lift a company at the same time, very, very limited. When you graduate, now it's a time, well, I can focus on it. I can put 40, 50 more hours, 60 hours a week into what I'm doing. I can lift this company. I can get really serious about it. Whereas, so you have people working at different paces going through. Now, in terms of some of the folks that have been very successful, and one of them, Stage Key, with Axel. And Axel was on your podcast in terms of things. And when you think about that, and you think about him, his start was taking my course in media studies, and me convincing him, oh, come on over to the hub and let's kind of like talk about some of these ideas. And then when it got time for him to graduate, he got very serious about, okay, I want to create a company. I want to take it somewhere. I want to have the best software for choreographers that we can design. And this is what I'm going to do. So yeah, that's indicative of not just how does somebody find their idea, but it's also indicative of when are people ready to actually click in and engage. So you can come to the hub, you can percolate these ideas, you can think about what it is that you're doing. You can do the research that needs to be done. You can do the research with either myself or now with Donovan, or you can do this with the library. And the library is really good at various of the databases that they have available. But you can really begin to percolate. Well, yeah, interesting. This is what the market is like. This is what the opportunity looks like. This is how I'm going to bring my idea into being and how I'm going to approach that market. And you can plan and take steps along to forming that. And when you go to graduate, when you get into your last year, when you have a lot more time, then yes, now you can make things kick. Not everybody does it the same way.
I have my mic quiet because there's noise in the background.
That's fine. Not everybody does it the same way. For example, there are incubators. The very first question when you come to them, how are you going to monetize that idea? Right? And if you don't have the answer, we're going to do this, this, this. Right? If you don't have that answer straight away, it's like, goodbye, or we're not going to take you. That is not the first question I ask people. The first question I ask people is, what's the problem that you're working on? What is it you care about? What is it you want to solve? What impact do you want to make? Right? And why? And then after they tell me, like with Richard, it was, well, I want to do scooters. I want to do mobility. I'm interested in creating a company that can solve the problem of the last mile after you get off the bus or wherever you're going. It's then to figure out, well, why does that problem belong to you? What's the fit? Right? What's the fit? What's the unique aspect, the killer advantage that you have, that you bring to what it is that you're doing? For Axel, for Stage Keep, this guy's a phenomenal dancer. He's been dancing since he was 8 years old. He's been working with choreographers. He's been putting on shows. He has the passion for exactly what he's doing, and he knows the problems associated with it. Perfect. If I went and tried to do Stage Keep, I wouldn't be able to bring that kind of headspace and understanding to the problem. I haven't been there. Right? So what is it that makes you the person to solve that idea? It's critical. It's critical because when you have that killer advantage, that's one of the key aspects to success. A lot of people think that it's money. You're right. It's money. Money's the answer. With money, all good. And no, in my opinion, money's a factor. It's not that it's meaningless. But the most critical factor for success, as I've seen it, in terms of we've done 200 companies, most critical factor is that passion and how much you own the solution, how much you own that for being able, that killer advantage to bring that into play and to make that difference. So a lot of people, I mean, they have ideas. Everybody has ideas. And they think, oh, this is $1 million idea. This idea will change the world. It's a wonderful idea. Well, having an idea is definitely part, but until you recognize that it's what you bring to the idea and what advantage you bring to the idea and what commitment you bring and what passion you bring to then executing on that, that's the difference. Right? That is absolutely what makes or breaks the early stage in terms of its success.
Yeah, like, a few key things to construct there. One, taking that time to like identify what your key differentiators are, your unique selling, unique value proposition, what makes you different, and part of that is stuff that the founder brings into that problem. One of the key things I've learned from the hub early on is the idea of competitors being a good thing. That if you're not in a space where there's competitors, that it might be a bad thing that you're doing something that no one else is thinking of, might not be an actual problem. But if there's actual competitors and there's a problem set to be here to be solved and refined, and you might have something better than your competitors, and I really enjoyed. But going back to some foundations, you talking about me being the first person to knock on the hub's door, right? That was probably the 40th or 50th door I knocked in UFT looking for solutions for my problem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when I first came up with this idea, this Mappian, a map-based social network, the idea of mapping things out by geography and be able to move a map around. Okay. Yeah.
Hang on just a second. My dog's scratching at the door here, and he's just going to continue to do that. Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
So backing up, you knocked on 50 doors.
Absolutely. I'm like, how? Yeah. So my question was, how am I going to launch a tech company? I saw the power, 2013 was when I came and found the hub. During that time is when I wanted to launch this company. The mobile revolution was kicking into high gear. This is the first wave of like app-based companies were blowing up. Facebook's taking over the world. Instagram was one of the biggest buyouts in tech history, right? And we were seeing this development of the app ecosystems coming up. And I'm like, I want to make a play into this, but how would I, who had no background in programming, with like a life science degree, having no friends that really like program or code in that space, how would I navigate the space? I had no idea. So naturally, I went to the computer science department, knocked on all those doors, asked professors like, hey, I want to start an app. How would I start? And they gave me this blank look, like, why are you here? Like, what are you asking me, right? And they were like, go talk to this person. And funny enough, back then, like before I had the name Mappian or anything, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew, I don't know, I had to join, start a company. I don't know what to name it. I don't know how I was going to build it, but I knew the problem. So the problem at the time, I kind of identified as a crowdsourced, geotagged social media, right? So I had this like acronym for it. So right? Like it was a horrible name, but I printed a red card with that title on it with my name.
You did.
And I would go around handing it out to like any resource I can find. This is the beginning of like Toronto's tech scene. There was no real institutionalized knowledge or even much articles or information about how do you launch a tech company. There was not much information. The only thing I really was going on Twitter and following people who are doing it in the Valley. In Toronto, everything was new. So I was going around handing out these cards, trying to talk to as many people as possible. And there was a point where UFT computer science department, they would see me coming and be like, the red card guy's here, the red card guy's here. And professors would close their door. I would see it. And the day that happened was when I was like, what the hell is happening? Like, I'm here trying to find this answer. Like, how do I start an app? Where do I go? I need someone to push me in the right direction. I was coming down from the floor of the computer science building. Now that it's purely a management building, but then computer science and managers in there. And I came downstairs and there was this, on the ground floor, this shiny building that says the hub, doors are open, it says front doors open. And I walk in there And exactly what I see, I see the hub's door sign there, 15 to 20-foot ceilings, right? Everything's brand new, amazing furniture, and I run smack into you, a Viking of a professor, 6'3", just telling me about, oh, this is a space to work on ideas. And I was just blown away. I'm like, I feel like I was like, those times where you feel like it's almost like you're doing something illegal. Like, what do you mean? Like, you're telling me I just got to sign here, and I can come here
That's
with
right.
key access to a closed door environment where it's like it's okay for me to work on whatever I want to work on. You might not have all
Right.
the answers, but together we'll figure it out. That's along the lines that you told me this, right? It's like, and I didn't actually realize I was the first one. All I knew was that I had a place now where I can validly work on a concept. Maybe not get the answers directly, but I remember sitting at the hub for maybe 80 hours a week for all of that summer, 2013 summer, or 2014 summer, the year after, I'm not sure. But like basically sitting there and just writing down the idea,
Yeah.
like all the problems that I needed. Like I don't know that I know. Right? I think we called it the unknown unknowns. What don't you know that you need to know,
Mhm.
right? And I started writing out all these questions and then going and researching it, and then each question led to like branched out in 3, 4 more questions, and I was just mapping out all these different things I would need to know to start this company. And that time, that to break down this problem of understanding software, understanding design, understanding how humans use computer, like phones, and how to map things out, how to build usability into an app, how functionality works, what it takes to build things, like then also how to build a company, how VC capital works, like
Mhm.
all these different factors you need to get to solve the main underlying problem. And the hub gave me time and more than that, validation to work on it. And slowly the place got filled up, over a period of time, into more other people working on different things. And just being able to walk around and be like, hey, what are you working on? And they're talking
Mhm.
about some other problem. One of my biggest mind blasts was walking into Will and his original co-founder working on Alpha something, like they
Yeah.
were working on this file sharing system, a distributed file sharing system where if you
Yeah. Matt.
download, yeah,
Matt
Matt,
Nolan. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Matt.
And
No.
they literally had a bunch of servers set up in the corner of the room, like their
That's
own
right.
private network running, and they were just hacking away day and night. And they're trying to create the system where you can have a distributed file sharing network that anywhere
Mhm.
you go in, any computer you go on in the world, you can go on, put in a key, and boom, magically they'll pull files from different sources from different computers, and you can have a distributed like file sharing network
Yeah.
with like it's like torrents plus Google Drive put together, and they built the damn thing, right?
They did. They did.
Right, and they were working on like super hardcore problems that's just for like for the theory of it. And I'm like, this is
And
freaking crazy. Ran into Axel, who's working on Stage Keep at the time. This is a guy who's a dancer who also happens to be a computer scientist, who also happened to have a photography company, now working on apps to make
right.
choreography better. All these different people came from different industries and started building their own things, and it was just like a mosh pit of just ideas and people
That's right.
and people grinding through it. And I can't ever take back that experience because it was probably one of the best moments of my life, initially grinding through it out. So having that as a background, it just made me full gear into this, because Mapping at that time was my third company I started at UFT, right? I started my first company at 17, at 2008, when the
Oh,
financial
that's
crisis
right.
happened,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
right?
I remember. Yeah.
And one of the main reasons that failed was lack of knowledge, lack of mentorship. I was CFO of that company. I remember that summer we made
You were
made some good
successful.
money. Yeah, we made some
Yeah.
good money with that company, but like I was CFO with like with a grade 11 accounting
I remember.
course
I remember.
knowledge, and I didn't have a place to go to learn more. And this is before smartphones, before even through before smartphones were things. You can't even Google on the pocket on the go, right? So I experienced the problem of like, one, not having a mobile system, so that led to like understanding the problem set of how mobile based information systems are great and can solve problems, maybe more appreciative of Mapping as a problem set. But two, understanding the need for like mentorship and support, and just having an environment we can bounce ideas and gain knowledge. The unknown unknowns is so important, right? Because experiencing failure of a company at a young age makes you more appreciative. And one of the things that I always I feel like I was a leg up is that I failed fast and I failed young, so that it always gave me a chip on the shoulder. So by the time I came to the hobby event, I was just so determined, because I was like, here's this place finally where I can go and get some support, right? And
Oh,
funny
good.
enough, like, talking about support, talking about the hub, like, me and Axel actually still laugh about this, right? Because we talk about the support we received. Like, we got all these training courses. You brought Mars Discovery District in to do training situation on how to do pitches and the lean startup and had pitch nights, all these
Sure.
things. But more than that, what really the resource the hub provided was you, the Papa Bear,
Oh, thanks.
right? The person you can go
Yeah.
to and you can just like whine and bitch about your idea. Like one of my most distinct memories, Gray, of you and the hub is I remember I had this math. I can't remember the exact problem, but I had this a huge problem where someone wanted to give me money, but I didn't know if I
Oh,
wanted. Like,
yeah.
I don't know the
Yeah. Oh,
terms.
yeah. I remember.
Like they
Yeah.
had all this, and I came to you.
It
And I'm like,
was
no,
a bad deal. It was
it
a
was a
bad deal.
it was a
Oh,
bad
yeah.
deal. And I'm
So
like,
let's
but
talk about that for just a second, right?
yeah.
Because this is still happening out in the ecosystem.
Mm,
So when startups are eager for taking money, they very well might be tempted in the pre-seed round to be accepting of a deal where somebody comes forward and says, I will I will give you, I believe in you.
mm,
I will give you, I will invest into you uh, $50,000 or $100,000 in value, in kind,
mm,
right? Not in cash, but in all sorts of things that we do well, right? Marketing materials and all sorts of sponsorship opportunities and guidance on this and whatever they can throw in there. And we'll get our money back, later. When you get your seed round coming in, it'll all work out and we'll exit at that point. And if you just think about it, well, that doesn't sound bad. But here's what it is when it's done wrong and when this is what was being offered to you.
mm,
It was when somebody says, "Oh, I will I will contribute into you." I think it was $25,000 worth of stuff. It wasn't very much, but it all boiled down like cotton candy. It all melted down. When you really looked at how much this was going to cost this individual, it was something like $4,000 or $5,000 maybe. But they were valuating it, what they were giving to you, at $25,000, right?
mm,
And that they were going to, when they exited, they were going to take out, 50. So on the basis of having given you four, they were going to take out 50. And the clause that was in the contract that was so objectionable was that they had um, first creditor status for first to exit. In other words, they would get the money
mm,
out before you would get the money. So they were going to take this money out from you and from the seed money that you would have desperately needed and earned. And they were going to take their stuff. In other words, it was a scam. It was, here's $5,000 at most of stuff, really hard stuff that we're contributing in, but we're telling you it's worth a lot more. We're inflating it, and we're going to take your hard-earned seed money when you get it. We're going to get in front of you. We're going to be first creditor and get in front of you before you get your money. And when we saw that language together, and you knew at the time, you said, Gray, something doesn't seem right about this contract. I'm not, what do you think? And I said, no, this is bad contract.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, like the amount of services they're offering right now would have been worth like 0.4% of like a mentor's 5 hours, like a high-end mentor working like 5 hours a month for a startup, providing some mentorship value that can solve. And they're like, we're gonna do accounting work for you, we're gonna do this kind of services, operational help. They're overselling it. And one of the miraculous things about that was like, I remember going back and forth, discussing this, and we discussed this, we went through the merits of it. But one of the most distinct memories I have is like when I came in, like it was bugging me because I was drowning with a lack of knowledge, right? Because I don't know tech, I don't know how to launch this thing. I had this problem I want to solve. I was itching to get it out there. I know if I was first, it'll be like a huge boon. And I remember this image of you just one day I came in super anxious, just like, blurting about all these different things, and you calmly sat down, listen, and then you completely switch topics and start talking about a story from like some 10 years ago, 20 years ago, from a professional experience you had, and some complete random story, and you sat there and you're talking, and I'm just there like, what does this got to do with what I'm talking about? But you just kept talking, and you talk for about a good 15, 20 minutes until like I'm no longer anxious. I'm just like, I'm just super confused until it, like, everything kind of calmed down. And the way you structured the story was that, shit happens. Here's the story of when shit happened, and we got through it. And then you finished the story and you just turned and you just looked at me and smiled, like that's it. And then it just kind of started molded in the room. It's like, shit happens. What are you gonna do about it? Like, how are you gonna respond? And it just lingered there. And I just remember it being like, okay, like stuff happens to everybody. This is just one part of the path, right? And that kind of mentorship is when you're like on alpha mode, when you realize that it's not actually the problem in front of the person, it's how people are treating that problem, right? The emotional state, because when you're so invested in a company, and like there's so many things happening, you have parents at home that are relying on you to go to university, get that income. There's pressure from there. You have a girlfriend who has certain expectations. You're in that young age where you're trying to thrive, and you have all these ambitions and drive, and you're taking the time to work on this idea that itself has potential. This high pressure environment, emotions get mixed into it really quickly. And one of the key factors that you are able to play is that, hey, you know, you're experiencing this right now,
Well,
but how to remove yourself from it, right? By
you've
putting.
got you got me pegged.
Mhm.
Let me explain a bit of the style.
Yeah.
Right? When people are really involved in the emotion of the conflict or whatever it is, the problem that they're dealing with,
Mhm.
you can try to advise them directly on point about that, which I do as well. But another technique, especially when somebody's really, really hot,
Mhm.
is to deflect it over by being a related story. It's on point, but it's not directly confrontational to you and what you're dealing with immediately in the heat of the moment, impassioned and all that. So I work a little sideways and bring in a story, hopefully of relevance, that talks about a situation that's somewhat parallel or somewhat has some reason that I'm bringing that forward. There's some
Mhm.
learning that come from that, which is to be directly brought to bear on things. But that's how I do that. And it's because to do some things in a different way might end up being somewhat confrontational. This is my way of providing an educational, bit of information in a context that is less confrontational because it's not about the case in point that's immediately in front of us.
Mhm.
So hopefully it's not just some random story which is just completely like off the topic, but it's something which is relevant, or at least I see the relevance to it in terms of how this comes in to play for why this is something that we should really think about here. So it's bringing up an example to bring in that's non-threatening, a different example from a different situation with different people, but that from that learning, now we understand what happened over there. Okay, now how can we take from that learning and now bring that into ourselves for what it is that we're supposed to draw from that, and then take that learning and bring it to bear on the problem that we're addressing. That is how I work, particularly in hot situations. So yeah, I don't like confronting. I don't like. It's not my style.
Mhm.
Just definitely not my style. I don't think it's my role, and I don't think it's the best way that people learn either.
Yeah.
I don't want to get yelling match with somebody
Mhm.
about something. And there are times there have been entrepreneurs. Again, we've had 200 companies go through that. There have been some of those entrepreneurs who have been extraordinarily stubborn. And stubbornness, when it comes to being an entrepreneur, is a valued commodity.
Mhm.
It leads you places when directly sort of channeled. But it can also be, besides being a great asset, it can be your Achilles heel. It can be the worst thing. It can be like why you're not adapting or changing or looking at something and turning it a different way to maybe approach it differently. It can get you stuck and stuck in a really, really horrible way because you're so stubborn to not move off of that plate. So how do you move somebody who's stubborn? Well, what am I going to do? Walk up to them and yell and scream at them? No, I can't do that. So it's a matter of just keeping and bringing into play examples of things that are relevant and showing, well, in this instance, this is what happened here, with the hope that this will begin to nudge somebody past an impasse, otherwise an impasse. That sometimes has worked, sometimes hasn't. So, but it is a style. It's just a way of kind of being. I like the hub to be a place that has a lot of excitement, a lot of people contributing in, a lot of one-on-one coaching in private that helps to guide and to steer, a lot of examples, a lot of speakers coming to talk about their journey, and maybe they're like 2 years or 5 years ahead of everybody else, and people go, oh yeah, well, gee, if he or she can do it, well, darn, I guess I can. Whereas if I talk about me doing it, well, there's too much of a gap. But somebody who's in their 20s or early 30s and they have the success going, perfect. So we have that on the go. We have a speaker series. We have a fireside chat series. We have a workshop, interactive workshop series. And now that interactive workshop series, what do I mean by that? Well, when you come, it's not being lectured at, because I found that maybe I found the hard way, but being lectured at for entrepreneurs is not the right way. Having them dig in and get their hands kind of, into something, that's the right way.
Yeah.
And having them apply it and then take the learning through the application, that's the right way. It's a very hands-on. So when you talked about experiential, this is the experiential. We get involved doing something. So the people who are coming to do the interactive workshops, we're on Zoom. We do the breakout rooms. We put people into the different breakout rooms. We give them an assignment, and they're to execute on that assignment with somebody else in an interactive way, in a learning way, in that breakout room. They have maybe 15 minutes to do so. It could be that person one has to make a deal with person two. And then there's a whole background in terms of the case study kind of approach. These are the things that are motivating person one. They need to get this deal. They have to get it at a certain price. Here's what's motivating person two. They're really kind of want to make the deal, but they want to make it on their terms. And maybe there's something else that they need. And then can these people actually come about and do a negotiation together? Because negotiation was what that workshop was all about. So getting people to talk to each other and make a negotiation. Then, okay, end of the breakout, everybody comes back. Well, so did you make a deal? Did you negotiate? Were you successful? And time after time after time, they have been. But how they've been successful has varied a lot. Some people have been more forceful in terms of getting better deals. Others have been less so. All that, but it's a great learning experience. And then you comment back as everybody's sharing on what deal they got. And so somebody's wondering, how the heck did they get that deal? Wow, that's a pretty, so there's a lot of learning that comes into bearing there. And those skills are something that then applies back to what they're doing when they're negotiating with their team, or they're negotiating with clients over contracts, or they're negotiating some other aspect of partnership or merger or something. All these things come into bear. So we go through these kinds of interactive. So it's not just sitting there and like we do that at the university, right? You sign up for a course and you're coming in, you listen to the class. There will be reading. There might be a class presentation. There might be
Mm.
some, you know, interactive components there too. But by and large, the university system is still one of lecturing at people. And entrepreneurs, I don't think, really respond best
Mm.
in that environment. I mean, yes, the concepts are important to learn, but they're important really to apply. So, but here's the hands on. Here's the chance to make this real by making it apply to you. So, others have to do with sales and sales strategy. Others have to do with marketing and marketing strategy. Others have to do, and it's all the same thing. We break out, we go through, here's the exercise, put the pieces together, come back. How did it work for you? And it's peer to peer to the extent that it's entrepreneur to entrepreneur, you know, doing these things together, but then coming back, and then the whole thing is to transfer that knowledge, transfer it to the direct problem of what it is that we're doing right here. So that's some of the ways that the hub has grown a bit in terms of the programming that it offers. And then there's the one-on-one coaching that we still do all on the side. And that's exciting. That gets really into the heart of what's the hurdle? What's stopping this from being a success? You know, we all have fears,
Mhm.
and entrepreneurs have fears for sure. And we tend to cover them up quite well. Maybe it's bravado, maybe it's we're so self-assured, maybe it's that we're convincing ourselves, maybe we just that kind of mentality of this is what we're going to do. We're just going to push forward. But there are fears. And when it's the one-on-one, a lot of those fears come forward. Then it's a matter of the more that people can drop the pretense, the more they can actually talk about what they are afraid of. That's at the point when we can like dispel those fears and get people to understand, well, here's how you kind of take steps on this to make this happen.
Mhm.
The greatest fear that I think people have in the early stage of entrepreneurship is over launching and going live. It
Mm.
is the greatest fear. It is the largest hurdle when you're going from idea to business. In that early stage, that is the greatest fear. It's the fear that everything I've thought will maybe be proven to be wrong. That my thinking that there's going to be this great success maybe will come as a crushing blow because it won't succeed. Tremendous fear, tremendous anxiety. And in terms of that, um, what I need to do in working with people is to show them, well, what's life like on the other side of the launch? What's life like over there? And suppose that it is something that doesn't work quite so well. Can you change it? Can you modify it? Can you iterate it? Can you come out with another version of it? Can you approach it different? Because we have more than one shot after we go live, usually. Some instances, maybe not. But for the most part,
Mhm.
it's something that we can launch and we can get feedback from. We can learn from the feedback. Oh, you didn't like that. Oh, okay, that didn't do what. Oh, okay. Or you don't find this useful. Oh, okay, we thought it would be, right? And you change things up, you modify. Particularly if you're doing something like an app, apps are iterated like crazy. If you're doing something like a service, services are iterated like crazy. If you're doing something like a product as well are iterated like crazy. Maybe not as much as apps are, but there's still a lot of iterations that go into things.
Mhm.
So as soon as you understand that you have to get on the other side to make all of this begin to then happen, to get the success, to get the revenue, to get the things working. And the longer you stay stuck here, the worse it is for you.
Yeah.
What happens when you stay stuck? Well, first, the team that you brought together starts to get a little bit anxious about what's happening. They start to worry. And you can say, okay, well, no, we're going to launch in, say, we have 4 months. We're going to launch in 4 months. The team will work along up to the 4 months. And then if you don't launch, then what? And if you don't launch then, you say, well, it'll be another 3 months or another 2 months. Well, it begins to erode confidence in the team itself. This can only go on for so long before members of the team will begin to then want to leave, go do something else. They're not with you so much anymore. And if you stay stuck there and don't launch, that's exactly what will happen. It will implode. So you need the momentum, number one. You need the commitment from others, and you need people to be on the same sort of same desired pace of that path. Everybody's working to the same sort of rhythm, you could say, with the idea that we'll launch, we'll do this, we'll get to this place, we'll get to this next milestone. So we have this kind of thing kind of moving along. So you have a question on your mind there.
Yeah, I mean, the idea. I remember the launch thing. I'm laughing about it because there was this one year where you're walking around like like a slave driver. Like, when are you gonna launch? When are you gonna launch? When are you gonna launch your product? Right? Like, you finally honed into the major problem that everybody had, was that, this is like second or third year of the hub. Is like, people are working on this for too long. They're tinkering. The difference between a tinkerer and like innovator is that an innovator works on problems that other people have, and he commercializes that. They create some kind of IP. IP plus commercialization equals innovation. If you just have IP, you're just tinkering. You're just building on something that's making something better,
exactly,
but not necessarily solving a problem. And the only way you're solving a problem when you're innovating, if you get it out there into the public and learn from it. And this, you kind of drilled it into everyone's head for that, for quite a bit. I mean, like, when you're going to launch should be like the primary thing. Is like, how are you going to get this to market? How are you going to learn? How are you going to test? How are you going to get feedback? Exactly what you said. And you kind of drilled it, especially into my head. It's like, launch means learning. So the quicker you launch, the quicker you learn, the better you iterate, the better you can build a better product. And we kind of got into our heads that, especially as entrepreneurship got like fableized and becomes more of the counterculture, we hear these stories of like, Instagram getting like 1 billion users like overnight, Facebook, being treated like crack. It's like, it's being driven into the dopamine of the student body and being absorbed. Like, it's like these viral products that we're like, if it's something, it doesn't happen quickly, then we've failed. Therefore, I had to make it perfect. So it launches, it's gonna be a perfect launch. And we have this counter concept minds. And one of the things that this mantra has done for me is the idea that, okay, if you have an idea, just get it out there. Even if it's pencil and paper, just get it out there and test back from feedback. And there's 1, 2, 3 people actually using it, get feedback and then build upon it. And one of the things I really appreciate about that is that even when you're launching a tech product, especially now, a furial tech has gotten, that don't necessarily need a tech solution. I've heard this concept. It's like the Wizard of Oz concept. You put up this facade of like, look, we have this beautiful shiny machine that's going to do this for you, but behind it is literally like manual labor. Me and my guys, we talk about it. We call it bad AI. Human automation, right? Humans automating a task, making it look like a machine is doing it, until you can actually build a machine to do it, to actually learn the thing. So the more quickly you can test your solution in the market space, the faster you can learn, the faster you can drive that. And if you think about it, if you bring the shortened learning curve and the ability to launch, right? You learn, launch, and you test and you repeat. Like, you keep going down this cycle.
Okay.
If you can the more you can shorten it, the faster you actually virally grow. Growth is dependent not on like, oh, you launch something and you shoot to the market, but how quickly you iterate and make it more and more perfect, more and more better. How can you refine it better and better, right?
Well, and specifically with the set of users who are choosing to adopt it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about the fit. And how do we have something where there's a product market fit? How do we have it that it actually does kind of get in like a glove and do what it needs to do? And it's part of that is through working with the people who are actually using, the product or using the service or using the app. What is their experience? What is it that they want? Because they're the ones that are going to be using it and then adapting. For the most part, that's the strategy, and it's a pretty good one. And you can use it in a business to business, strategy as well. When you're developing software for a business to business purpose, you choose a particular client early on to work with, and you get feedback from that client to help you understand that what you're building is what people want. So it's that whole thing of, don't just build it with the idea that build it and people will come, but build it with the idea that you're getting feedback from the users or the potential end users that they are going to then, validate that what you've created is actually the right thing. So that's critical. And on a business to business thing, your first client that you bring in can be exactly the client that helps you mold something. So what do you have to consider when you're bringing in and working with your first business, your first client? You have to choose well. You have to choose them knowing that they represent the larger community at which you want to then be doing business. In other words, they represent the market. If you choose somebody at one extreme or the other, in terms of they're overly demanding, they want tons of features, they're like super into this, they want tons and tons of stuff that nobody else would want. Or they're on the other end of the spectrum, hey, this little thing, they'll do. If you choose on either extreme, you're not choosing what will become then the center core of the representative, entity around which you're designing, building, and actually executing. So in terms of this, your first client can make a big difference when you're doing it at that kind of a software development kind of service or software SAS kind of approach to things. But if you're doing an app, it's the same sort of thing where you want to get feedback from your users. If you're doing a product and there's a product launch, you want to get feedback from the initial users of that product in terms of what do they think about it, testimonials coming back, that sort of thing, all in terms of continuing to validate what it is that you're creating. And the more that you stay on this side, pre-launch, the more you stay on this side, the more you deny yourself that very vital and valuable information that will carry you further along. So if we go back to the software that I created, which is now, years ago, but the thing there was, it was exactly that. Working with a client to establish what was it that client needed. Now, had I worked with, a different client who was more demanding, I wouldn't have been able to sell or license that software across the market. But the one I chose actually was right in the middle in terms of just perfect for this is a representative client to work with. And that made a large difference in terms of things. So when you're getting feedback, it matters. Feedback from whom? Right? It has to be feedback from the people that matter to you and to your market and your approach to how you're bringing things to market. And it helps define the product. It helps define how you're approaching the market itself. It helps define the marketing materials. And there are all sorts of tools around which we can help design everything about the company's product, communication, marketing, and sales, all based around how this anchors. Without that central information, again, you haven't launched. You're denying yourself. You're developing it in the blind, right? Can't fully see, right? How do you anchor yourself? You can't. You can only anchor yourself in what you believe to be the case, And it could be that you're wrong. It could be that you're lying to yourself, or you really don't have quite the finger on the pulse that you thought you did. Not all of us are Steve Jobs, can see and be, 1,000% right about what we're going to bring in is just going to be the thing, right? We require market research to actually understand the world around us that we're about to enter. And we need to talk to people. We need to talk to potential users and owners of products and stuff and understand, are we solving the problem? Is this actually working? Is it working as well as we thought?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of entrepreneurs consider themselves to be the ideal customer, right? The ideal client, the ideal customer. So they build for themselves, right? They build for themselves thinking, I know that this is going to work because I would be happy with it. It would work for me. This is the best thing ever because it will work for me. Now, it could be that that is absolutely bang on right. Could be. But it could also be that there aren't that many of you to validate the market potential for what it is that you're developing, right? We have to know how many of you are there. And that's the mistake. And how can we connect to all of those other yous in the world? How do we find them? So there's a marketing challenge. So just because you develop it for something that works for you doesn't mean you're doing it right. So that's why testing it in the market, important. Testing it with a subset of the market, important. Understanding what your go-to-market strategy is going to be. Therefore, these are the people we need to understand early on, really important. So, yeah, can you find, can you learn from, can you gain insight? So there's focus groups, there's questionnaires or surveys, there's feedback forms, but you have to listen. You have to, when you put it out there, you got to listen and listen hard about things and also be honest and not afraid to change things if you need to change them.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely indicate a lot of wisdom around this topic of entrepreneurship and deploying and controlling your mind state around entrepreneurship. Can we take a moment to break into how you develop that? One of the key things that stands out about you is you're a PhD in archaeology. When I learned that about you, you're an archaeologist. I'm like, holy, this is Indiana Jones now, working on startups. Because that's kind of vibe you kind of gave off. You were telling me how you wanted to go in archaeology because it would give you freedom to travel the world. You could, on the university's dollar, under this whole principle of learning about different cultures, learning about things, that can organize yourself to go out, travel the world, and in an organized, systematic way, and also at the same time make a living and also make a name for yourself. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Archaeologist is it's a pretty cool gig.
Make some cool discoveries along the way.
Absolutely.
So the way that works, how that is relevant, is that when you're doing things, and it could be not just archaeology, but it could be other kinds of approaches, people working in science or people working on other projects and things. It's that you're working with a team to execute on a particular result. So team formation, critical. You're also working with data and trying to interpret that and trying to bring some understanding to the world around you. And so that's critical too. But I guess I learned that I love working with people. I love working with teams. Yes, I still love to travel, and hopefully we'll get back to doing that someday.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of my experience that fits in terms of why I'm successful doing the job I'm doing. I'm not sure exactly that archaeology is key on that. Certainly getting a PhD is sort of like, that commitment, that dedication,
Hmm.
that stubbornness, that we're gonna do this, we're gonna get to the other side, and then make stuff happen. That's part of it, and certainly working with teams is definitely part of it. But I think that when I left academia, so I left academia in '95.
Mm.
I was tired of looking for the tenure stream job in archaeology, which people would understand is not an easy thing to find.
Hmm.
And I could have taken a tenure stream job in the States, but it would have been 2 air flights from my family, and it would have been a long distance there. And I would, geez, I would have been living in a place I really didn't want to live in. So I decided that maybe I didn't want to. And that's when I went into industry. And when you change, when you leave something that you've worked on so hard, it's very stressful. And you're then looking for, well, what do I know? What do I really have as skills? What can I really work on that will be successful? So, one of the things about archaeology, in a strange way, that has made me tremendously successful in my current job is the fact that I didn't succeed.
Mm.
Right? It's not exactly that I failed. I had a wild time doing it. I've got some great publications out there. I'd had some really wonderful years doing it. But did I get the tenure stream job? No. Did the brass ring come my way? No. Did I have to change what it was that I was doing? Yes. And this is something which many people in university face when it comes to, okay, I've worked on my career for so long. I worked in getting this degree. Maybe I got a BA. Maybe I have a master's. Maybe I have a PhD. Right? Right? Anyway, you worked on this for so long, and now you're doing something different. And it's you sit back and you go, what do I know how to do? What are the valuable skills that I have? Where can I go with any of this? And along the way, I found that I was pretty good with computers. And I was pretty good with programming. And then we were getting into the internet and doing things with educational CD-ROMs. When I formed my first business, it was actually in terms of that space. It was one on designing educational CD-ROMs. It was on what should the experience of learning through a digital medium be all about. And at the time, we were using that golden disc, to kind of develop that kind of stuff through either video learning on the CD or interactive programming of a kind. And then after I started to understand that the real value that I had was about the guidance aspect, the designing aspect, the getting into doing consumer insight research. And that's where I pivoted my company. Within a very short number of years, I was then doing consumer insight for marketing firms. And very fortunate in terms of the contracts that I got, and very rewarding in terms of the research that I got to be doing. So, okay, if we wanted to make a leap from archaeology to that, archaeology is about insight from data. It's about making leaps. It's about understanding why is something a certain way. It's about looking at things around and then saying, aha, this is why that was set up this way. Well, it turns out that skill of working with others, talking to people to understand what drives them, what motivates them, what is it that kind of gets them going.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that made my business very successful. So I did national campaigns for places like Quarry Integrated Communication. And Quarry is a marketing firm based out of St. Jacobs, out near Waterloo. And their clients, just wonderful, wonderful clients, and clientele exceptional projects to work on. So things to do with FedEx and with Bell and with Rogers and with John Deere and all these things. So you're dealing with some just wonderful projects to dive into. And then you're talking to people about problems, about products and services and what works for them. And you're trying to get into people's heads and trying to figure out, well, how can we innovate something that will actually work to address this problem? And those were my recommendations that I was making to those companies. Okay, now let's take all of that and forward it into my role here at the Hub. The ability to get into somebody's head, to know what is motivating and driving, the ability to look at what they're working with and extract from that, what is the lay of the land? What is it that's working for them? What's the feedback? The ability to help them shape the solution that works for fitting the problem. So you see, the very business that I created way back when is directly on point for the kinds of things that everybody is doing when they come to the Hub. So I'm, in a way, a mentor on that way with things. So that's kind of how I guess the pieces fit, I guess, in terms of stuff. I'm also a musician. I don't know how that fits, but again, I like people. I like to interact with others, and so I guess this kind of works with things that way too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, multifaceted. I mean, that's what it comes down to. When you talk about life, like one of the things I appreciate is that I always felt like the idea of a career just bogged my mind. Focusing life on doing one thing and jumping, or like staying within a company for a long time and just grinding it out and growing at a very linear pace in a safe way always threw me off. But one of the things I liked about you is this idea of like second, third careers. Like, you switch gears throughout your life and you've experienced them before to like, in extreme roles in other ways, in complete, fantastically different ways. But like that gives you a rich and full life, gives you perspective, right? And knowledge to like kind of like feedback on a multifaceted way. I like how you compare archaeology as a way of getting to the human mind. It's one of the main reasons that drew me to like my undergraduate in neuroscience psychology. But underneath that, when I graduated, I had enough credits for two majors and 3 minors, because I was so fascinated about the topics, neuroscience, psychology, biology, political science, sociology, right? Those are the degrees that I could have chosen between. And the day I had to choose, and I chose neuroscience and psychology because it sounded the coolest, right? Like a pairing.
Right. Yeah.
But my idea of wanting to understand people led me into a path of into a career of sales at different companies and selling different products. But the underlying skill set came in understanding people and how to deploy solutions towards them, right? And that came from this love of like people being like the greatest problem. They're like a complex problem, and if you can see the patterns that emerge within them, you can kind of see the problems that exist within that complex problem, the complex system. But archaeology, I think, is really unique because it talks about the historical context. But more than this, the archaeology, like everyone thinks about the dusty old professor. When I compared you to well, wow, why am I blanking on this now? Indiana Jones, right? Was some of the stories he told me about archaeology. You in a dig site somewhere, right? And like, and like in a land of a dictator, and there's like military jets be flying over, and you're like, oh damn, like maybe we should have, we should get out of here, right? And stories like that. I remember one time you tell me, you bought these bottle rockets. You can shoot rockets up with a camera. You built this whole system so you can shoot a camera up with a rocket, really high up, and it deploys a parachute and comes down and it takes pictures. And you're telling me this when I was trying to look into drone technology, and we're talking about you're like, yo, I had a drone back in the day. Just I had a parachute and fell at a certain time, a certain speed. But like, you took this into South America during a time of like real uproar of unrest, and you deployed this solution only to have military jets fly over you within like within a period of space, and you're like, wait, now I'm double thinking this. Like I feel like even though like the
Right.
archaeology was your tool set, but yourself, you're being an entrepreneur. You're developing solutions and to solve problems within the space of archaeology, within the context of archaeology. And that's a kind of key takeaway I've had. And that's what I realized about specialized knowledge. When you have these kind of degrees or certificates or like professional training in one thing, what you have is like specialized knowledge, skill sets you can deploy. But really, entrepreneurship is a multifaceted way of bringing different things together to solve complex problems and deploy them into the space. And you can be in different places. There's entrepreneurship, which we near to hear about, and creating startups. But there's also like intrapreneurship when you're inside of a larger institution,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
The hub arguably is entrepreneurship, because within the larger context of like a traditional university, UFT being one of the biggest institutions of learning in the world, you're doing this novel thing, which is, hey, let's not just teach people this stuff and charge them a whole bunch of money to get access to our knowledge. Let's also take them to sit around and like let them brainstorm and develop work on ideas they might have. And I think, you know, University of Toronto, more than most schools, with 13 incubators, and the Benton and Bass Center now taking, having a much more direct role in development, is starting to see that entrepreneurship and fostering this idea, cultivating this idea of problem solving, especially of such a young, ambitious crowd of people as of university students, right, is itself rewarding. Right, we're seeing these landscapes of the universities change now. Universities used to be these wall gardens of knowledge where, like, yeah, we have all these professors creating all this research, but there's a paywall here. You pay us to come inside and get trained, and then you go out in the world with a certificate saying, hey, you came to this big
Right.
brand
Yeah.
institution. But now YouTube exists. Virginia Law School has their entire law program on YouTube. Harvard has entire beginner studies like on YouTube. So
Mhm.
like it's easier now than ever to acquire knowledge, but now it's about, hey, what do I do with it? What are the creative outputs that I can have? How can I create higher order thinking out of it? And that's what, places like the hub really provides is cool. You can get knowledge, but what can you do with
Mhm.
that knowledge? Right?
Well, you undoubtedly remember or know a company by the name of Genesis, right?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So when we think of Genesis, which is solving the world of waste management, being revolutionary in terms of that, and they've come up with a way of doing this that also creates a product in terms of biodegradable plastic that they can sell. And when Genesis formed and took hold and then launched from the hub and then went down to the hatchery and then went down to creative destruction lab and then it's gone on from there. It's a tremendous example of how just what you were talking about, how the university space has changed. It's one where we have a student, in this case, a student who went through the master's in environmental science, and they are then applying that knowledge, and they get the inspiration for that within the lab in the context of their education. But then they have a way to take that and without leaving the university to then begin to work on, okay, how can we get this together? How did Genesis go from its initial, you know, concept and validation within a kind of a rice cooker in a lab?
Mm,
How did it go from that to creating a company and creating something which is just tremendously promising in terms of how it can revolutionize, technology for waste management? Well, obviously, its founder is, you know, very, very, smart in terms of all of the aspects that are involved in doing this. But in terms of that, there's also been some guidance along the way
mm,
and some help along the way. And the University of Toronto overall has been that help. So I'm not claiming it's just me, but her professors, um, the hub, the other incubators, the competitions that she's been part of, the way that this has helped shape things. And so many people have had a hand in helping that take form. Now, that's not to take away from the brilliance of the individual entrepreneurs themselves, because they are just incredible people for doing what they're doing. Very smart, very capable. But when it comes down to it, this is what you're talking about. The difference today when you're creating something and you're taking it somewhere. So presently in the hub, there are a couple of other companies. One has the ability to do something phenomenal in medicine. And presently with COVID and the pandemic and all that, we recognize that the development of drugs and the time it takes to bring them to market is at times a matter of life and death. And this individual has figured out a way to shorten the development cycle for drugs that are to address respiratory illness. And he has a patented process for providing a very needed critical testing material early on in the phase of drug development that will shorten the length of time it takes to develop a drug by about 35%. It will also take the amount of money that's needed to bring a drug to market by a substantial amount of money as well, talking about savings of millions. So that individual years ago would have been, okay, you get your degree, off you go, good luck to you. Right? In this particular instance today, it's not that at all. It's a matter of that individual coming to the hub and saying, I need some help. I need some help forming a company around this, understanding how I approach the market with this, understanding, how I build this out and what sorts of opportunities lay ahead for me. So we're doing that currently in terms of working with that. The promise or the potential promise for this discovery is absolutely phenomenal. Truly. It can go, if things go well, it can go into the hundreds of millions of dollars in a fairly short period of time. There's only so much I can talk about it, of course. That's why I'm kind of skating around the edges of what I can say. But then there's another. This individual has something where he's trying to be revolutionary in terms of grocery warehousing and grocery delivery. And he's designed a robot. And this robot is in trials at the moment in food warehouses. And
what's the name of the company?
Okay.
You're not allowed to talk about it, or
I can talk about this one because it's
a current cohort, right?
It's on the hub's website. This is Gradient Robotics, and the founder is Samir Kaya. And in terms of that, just phenomenal individual in terms of having put things together from the understanding of, well, how do we design a robot? How do we get a robot to do this? And what do we need it to do? And when people think about robots, I mean, they think about like, ooh, like danger, danger, Will Robinson, danger, danger, or they think about, things going, or, all sorts of things about robots. Right? But what this is, it's really a large rideable cart, is the way you could say it. And it's programmed such that it can navigate through space. And it knows where everything is in the warehouse. So you type in the list of stuff that you have to go get, and you literally ride this robot through the space, and it'll help you collect all this stuff. The robot doesn't get tired. The robot is phenomenal in terms of what it does. And he has this in trials and wants to bring this to Canada, of course. And there's things that are happening there on that front. And by bringing that into the hub, it's to look at, well, again, how do we do this? What are the steps? What are the steps in terms of where do you want to go relative to getting this together and getting your sales potential outlined and your revenue lined up and the investment that you need in terms of the pre-seed and then seed rounds to come into your company. So we're working with him on all of that sort of stuff. And so, it's a great space to be working on stuff with. So yeah, it's people who come, they bring an idea, they bring capability, they bring their own, as I say, killer advantage for making things work. For Samer, the critical advantage is his knowledge on robotics and his ties to an engineering firm that can help make all of this happen. And those ties are just phenomenal. It's much like Richard. Richard, in terms of coming, was his knowledge about scooters, his ability to, bring that into the market. Well, it's the same thing here. With Genesis, it was the knowledge on science, the killer advantage being knowing the scientific discovery that allowed for the actual, making of the process by which waste is kind of disintegrated, devoured, whatever you'd want to say, but also by which a different product is made as a byproduct along the way. So it's a matter of what is it that is the real crystal clear advantage that they propose in terms of, and then how do they build a company around that? What's the opportunity to build a company around that? So way back in the day with Genesis, it was a decision over, well, are you going to design a small machine that you can put into each kind of mini location, or are you going to design a large facility in which you can do these sorts of things? So I mean, major decisions being made in terms of what works.
Yeah. No, this is one of the main things that made me fall in love with what I do, like why I do this, tech startup based podcast is I grew to love talking to entrepreneurs, founders, because it's such a unique tribe of people. And most of this all came from exposure in the hub. Prior to the hub, I never ran into people who thought like me, like how do I solve problems? How do I launch companies? How do I solve complex problems? I always felt like an outsider looking in because everyone else was on like a straight and narrow path, get the grades or, go to the job, get the money, get the car, get the girl, like go a linear path in life. And I just wanted to do more. And I always felt like, there's something wrong with me. I always brought up with that kind of, came up with that kind of mindset, but came to the hub and you see this whole tribe, a whole community of people who always think like this, who are not looking at the linear growth, but how can I solve complex problems? How can I get an exponential, right? How can I get to another level where I can do so much more and get better? And this is a unique tribe of people. And talking to founders and like what drives them, what are the ideas they're working on? What are the unique upbringing that they had that's brought them to the point they are right now? That really brought out the juices in me, the creative juices, right? And what I naturally found was like, sorry, go ahead.
It's true of the entire community.
Yeah.
Everybody who's in there has something that they feel really passionate about doing. And setting that ablaze is actually just so much fun, I tell you. So yeah, there are presently women in the hub who have an idea on a certain cosmetic for women, and they're just really, really passionate about how this can solve and prevent certain kinds of skin cancer. And they have the background and training in terms of pharmacology to be able to know how this is all going to work. We have another company in cosmetics. This is Siobhan, who you know, who comes out with a chemistry degree. And he's passionate about doing things with natural products, just simple recipes, but simple recipes that work really, really well. And he has his company, Natural Organic Matters. And he's selling and getting that product out into the market. And he's now understanding, and we've been working with him to, well, you can't just have one product. We need you to think of, well, what's the suite of products? What are the other products that go along with? And he has all of that kind of ramped out well, too. So for him in particular, and for everyone, it's a matter of, well, what you're really, really good at. You know what you're exceptionally passionate about. You know what your true skill is. Now, how do you build a team that will take you further? How do you build a team that will form the company, right? So someone who is like Siobhan, well, he's the chemist. He's got that part down cold, right? He's really, really, really talented at that. And then, okay, well, who do you need to pack around him to then make the whole team such that they can actually take off, they can actually grow, they can actually go somewhere. So that's part of the whole advising that goes into things, and then trying to find collaborators to work with in terms of these different companies. So we have some of that going on. We have some women in the hub that are very passionate about mental health and about designing novel and unique solutions that can actually help in terms of the mental health front, either through a software service that's being developed to help people find the resources they need in a very novel way, and using artificial intelligence as part of the whole system by which people find what they need to find. Or we have people who are doing things that are more in terms of grocery delivery, or doing things in terms of, again, robotics. It's just a really fun, very varied space. And everybody who's in there has this unique talent where they have this passion around this problem, and they're uniquely gifted to actually bring about a solution with it. So yeah, it's a matter of having them understand who they are, not to underestimate who they are, which is so easy to do. It is so easy to not recognize the power that you bring in terms of the insight that you have on the problem that you want to fix. There's a reason that people own the problems they own. There is. It might be because they are the person who's ideally suited to solve them.
Mm-hmm.
And when you recognize that, yeah, that's the blessing. That's truly the blessing. So we work with people more than many incubators work with people. We get into people's heads maybe more than some do. I don't know what it is quite about what it is we're doing that is entirely responsible for the success we're having. But success has struck here not once, not twice, not a half a dozen times, many, many more times than all of that. So presently, we're, since the start of the pandemic, I think the combined revenue of all the startups in the hub is somewhere north of $5 million.
Amazing.
Since the start of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they wondered about what would happen with the hub when the pandemic started. I mean, it's a space, it's a physical space. Great, you're going to have to close your space. I mean, why don't we just all close it all down until this thing's over? And I was like, no, I don't think so. I'm getting more interest from the community about wanting to do things now than ever before. And everybody's talking about need to pivot, a need to find new revenue streams, a need to become successful in a different way, a need to open and knock on different doors. It was actually a real, well, you could say, creative time. If out of this pandemic, the economy is to become restored, and quickly, my belief is that it's with people who are entrepreneurs, who are coming out of the incubators and the accelerators, that are going to help drive that. These are people that pivot, they look for opportunity, they look for solving problems, they're very agile, they're very creative, they're extremely industrious, and tremendously resourceful. So these are the companies that are going to begin to take root. If you, during a pandemic, can establish a revenue, wow, imagine when the pandemic's over. If you, during a pandemic, can get all the pieces together for what is going to help as soon as this pandemic ends and people are back to doing something physically together again. Wow, that's something that we need to pay attention to. It's something that's deserving of support and investment, and for people to pay very close attention. And that's part of what's happening.
Yeah.
So yes, we've had companies, the pandemic hit, and we're going to shelf what it is that we were doing. Particularly hard hit were companies that were in the hospitality industry. Anything to do, and I think you were also affected by this yourself, as I recall. Anything to do with restaurants and hotels and the rest during this pandemic, just absolutely, a critical time where people were looking at, well, I'm not sure how I go forward here. But in many instances, people have gone forward. They've not gone forward of hammering their head into the wall over something that's not working. What they've done is they've looked at, well, how can we quickly pivot to make things work and look at new opportunities. Some of these things are going to stay as opportunity in terms of, for example, we have a company that's Cheaper Eats. Yeah, I think you know Cheaper Eats, right? So Cheaper Eats was doing the thing where skip the line to get your meal, and they were doing things for students, where all the restaurants and things around the university were all lined up for, well, you could make your order from the app, and you could make that order at the end of your class, and you could, I got, class is almost order. Okay, order now. Fine. I got just enough time to get over there, pick it up, and then get to my next class over there, right? Okay, fine, wonderful idea. And Ralph Mamari, the founder, was having that really work and was getting all sorts of traction and getting onboarding restaurant after restaurant after restaurant with that, and getting some traction with students in terms of using that. But when the pandemic hit, the restaurants closed and the university closed. And all of a sudden the app is like, nobody's making any orders because there's no students in class, and there are no restaurants that are open to go and get the food. So Ralph had a real need to pivot on his hands. And what he did is he looked at the space of food delivery, because he was, kind of in that space. And he started making the connection with people who were experimenting with food delivery techniques, and particularly with robots who are doing food delivery techniques. And that's where Ralph presently is at. He's looking at how can we do food delivery with automatic or automated, I should say, vehicles, like little robots, and do it quickly and safely, and just like all that kind of stuff. It's really just a hoot to look at how that is opening up. That's not going to go away when the pandemic goes away, any more than self-driving cars, will, disappear for whatever reason. They're going to be here too. And the way that people work, the way that people, engage with businesses and with product delivery and product ordering and the rest. So many of us have been buying stuff on Amazon or getting stuff delivered to the house. Some of this stuff is just going to stick and not going to change. Now, I don't want people who are listening to think that I'm saying that things aren't going to change or go back in some other kind of profound way, because absolutely they are. I look forward to when the pandemic's over and people can hug each other and go to parties together and just associate and, go on walks together. And I swear that people are going to travel and have all sorts of excitement for a good long time as soon as this thing's like that. I don't think there's going to be an empty seat on an airplane for a good long time as people can finally travel and get to places that they want to go. They're going to visit all sorts of relatives and friends. They're going to do all sorts of incredible things, or so I tell myself. So in the context of when you're trying to bring business into a post-pandemic world, it pays to understand that there are some things that will stay as well as some things that will change, and really embrace that. So yeah, people are going to still, to have things that are online, the convenience of having things that have been developed online, the convenience of having things that are brought to your home. We're going to have an interesting kind of forward motion in terms of where things go. Tremendous opportunity on that. And no, Uber Eats is not the only company in town that's going to make something happen in terms of that space. So yeah, some really, from what I see, earth-shattering redesign of how business works in the city of Toronto in particular, but also in cities across Canada and North America. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a very interesting time. And entrepreneurs are ideally positioned to take and make that the new reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. We've seen this evolution over the past 7-8 years, where Toronto's become like top 4 place in the world for innovation to occur, and it's everywhere. From all aspects of industry to the different sectors, even traditional areas like banking are looking for innovators to come in and change things up, right? And especially the pandemic has been a catalyst really to make everyone forward thinking to change. And the government of Canada has recognized this. The government of Canada there's so many reports that have come out. Me and Henry have started geeking out over these white papers released by different think tanks, different organizations, and it's different governmental bodies, talking about how the expected result is innovation, aka new company development. It's what's going to post-pandemic is going to rebound the economy, right? All economic growth expected to come from new company development, not the existing businesses. I think the globe's economy shrunk by 4.9%. I think that's out of Bloomberg this week during the past year. And coming back from that, a lot of people, because a shrinking economy makes everyone suffer, and we've heard these stories of suffering. But there's this one quote that kind of really resonates. That's been really coming out, is the idea that history doesn't repeat itself; it rhymes, and that if you want to look at the state of humanity. Look back at how it was 100 years ago, because the idea is that hard times create hard people, who then create good times that creates weak people. And we are in that state where, hard times creating hard people, right? And if we look back to 100 years ago, again, the world was in a pandemic with the Spanish flu. There was a Great Depression happening. And, we associate that era with the huge population of people who went homeless and they suffered and the disparity and inequality. But one of the things that we don't recognize is that, that was 1/3 of people. Another third, survived. They existed. They didn't experience much growth or anything, but no, they survived through it. But 1/3 did phenomenally well. In fact, in the United States, more millionaires were created during the Great Depression than all other periods of their history. And the idea is right now is the corona, the financial state outside of the pandemic is being coined by Scott Galloway as the Great Dispersion, where we're not seeing the destruction of wealth, but the transference, the rapid transference. Money being taken out of the number 1 asset class in the world, which is commercial real estate, transferring rapidly into the second largest asset class, which is residential real estate. And just that transference, when things are moving around, it gives a lot of opportunity for growth, a lot of opportunity for infiltration, a lot of opportunity for new things to come up. So the idea of new companies being able to capture all this is definitely possible. So yes, I think we're going to see a lot of disparity coming forward from a lot of changes, job loss, companies going out of business, but also, this is a time for people who are creating, to build things, for the problem solvers to step in with the hammers and the hammers and the tools, and start building. And what really drives that? It's centers like the hub, these places that draws people in together, give them the resources, and moves that forward. right?
Well, let me
What
give you
does
an example on
Yeah.
some of the stuff that you're talking about. Um, so right now we have a situation. Let's take restaurants for just the case of point. And restaurants have during the pandemic, if you're doing takeout, you have a lifeline. If you haven't been doing takeout, chances are you've suffered greatly and perhaps gone out of business. For those that are doing takeout, to leverage takeout, they've been doing things with Skip the Dishes and with Uber Eats and with others, other delivery companies to deliver the food to the homes, as well as you can go and pick stuff up yourself in terms of things. But in terms of the options, the amount of money that the restaurant loses when they are working with some of these delivery companies, the amount it costs them, it's pretty steep. And they don't have much choice.
Hmm.
They either go with some of these established delivery companies such that they can get on their platform and get to be known and visible and get their takeout, out there more, or they try to go it alone themselves, get flyers out, get the word out, try to get people who had come to the restaurant to know about the situation that they're doing takeout, hope for the best. In this particular mix, and my opinion is that some of the delivery companies have been overly, um, well, they've taken a bit of advantage over the situation. They're actually making a fair amount of money at the restaurant's expense. That's my own opinion about making the deliveries, and it's money that the restaurant can't really afford to lose. So how do we solve the problem where food delivery is too expensive for the restaurant to use the delivery services that are currently out there? Well, one way, the old school kind of thought on this would be, well, hey, we'll all shake out in the end. More local delivery companies will come into play and they will compete for a smaller share of the pie and it'll all sort out and maybe that would happen. But another way of doing this is to look at, well, can we do automated, vehicle delivery in some way, completely shake it up? I mean, completely shake it up, such that it's not a driver of a vehicle in any way, shape, or form that
Hmm.
is actually doing the delivery. And then how does that become available for restaurants to then have that as the way by which they do the food delivery? And what does that look like? What does the world of automated vehicles look like? And that's coming. It is part of the post-pandemic world. It's not because the pandemic created it, but it's in timing wise, it's on the other side of it. And when we have automated vehicles, how is that going to change the whole aspect of food delivery? So that's one area in which entrepreneurs are very active, will continue to be very active, and will dramatically change in a very short period of time. That meaning short period of years forward, where that will be something that we're seeing. Is there going to be a cost to that in terms of jobs? Yes. But on the other side is the will there be jobs created? And that's what we're looking at, all the time in terms of when new things come into being. How does it shift in terms of the workforce? What jobs need to be created? So if you have people making automated vehicles, servicing automated vehicles, in some way planning and the paths by which they go and sort of being your monitoring of what's happening in the landscape. All of that will create jobs. Whereas the driver, no. So this will change
Hmm.
as part of that world too.
Yeah. Like what like reminds me of is like the story of like the railroad sorry the railroad worker, right, who's like hammering away building the railroad tracks, looks over and see the steam engine pile driver that's like doing it right next to him, and for every 10 he puts down, that thing only does one, and he looks at it, smiles, But then like what he doesn't realize, like every month it's getting faster and faster. It's getting tweaked and gets better and better. And 1, 2 years rolls by, and now for every one he's doing, it's doing one. And then suddenly it's doing two for every one he's doing. And then three, then four, and five. Suddenly he's replaced. He's been outpaced, right? That was a story of the second industrial revolution, where steam power and engines came to be. We became energy became portable, electrification of the world came to be, and we saw this subtle shift in like the labor pools, where human labor had to shift from physical labor now to mental labor. And the third revolution, third industrial revolution furthered this, right? We put everyone into offices because now we had mass production, we had all this supply chains, and we need high level people to think about it and strategically plan this and work together in a beehive of complexity. We had the boom in urban centers. We need to put people together in one place to make these systems work. And now suddenly with the internet and with the AI revolution, the fourth industrial revolution now, it's almost reversing this trend, right? Where again we're seeing just like the railroad worker seeing the steam engine come, the AI driver, the thinking machine that's outthinking us, right? Where we have trained generations of people to be captured on a status of IQ, the ability to remember things and regurgitate it back. We've trained our citizens like this, and jobs are all based off of this. But suddenly, that skill set is becoming less valuable, right? Machines can outthink us, out remember us, can perform really remedial tasks at a very excellent degree with like at the cost of electricity, right? So now the next job is, okay, cool, this is happening. The next order level of work is how do we again strategize and put this thing into novel ways, right? So the idea being that entrepreneurs become like it's like the office worker of the 50s and 60s compared to the factory worker of like the 19th century, right? It's like it's a new evolution of work where it should be a very niche category, a very small segment of the world who is allowed to do this. Now it's going to become more and more mainstream, where that is the labor pools is being pushed towards, right? And thinking about that, right? Like what I'm really curious about is your thoughts on the evolution of the university, our higher centers of learning. I talk a lot about this with.
Well, I can pick up directly on that.
Yeah.
First, relative to finishing the thought on the workspace, we've all been working from home during this pandemic. Or well, not all, but I mean, some people still have to go clean the GO stations and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of us have been working from home. And in terms of that, how will that change the mentality of work when we get to the other side of this pandemic? So we'll find that it's not that we'll all just continue to work from home. No, that's not the case. But how does the whole experience of what we've done in terms of how comfortable are we with technology, in terms of doing the digital meetings, in terms of making the connections during this period of pandemic, how have we stretched and reached to others? How have we brought that world into being? We have become a bit virtual in the course of the past year, and we've become fairly comfortable in the virtual space that we are occupying. We become a bit more comfortable talking to our screen, right? It's odd at first for people to sit in front of a computer, talk to the screen, and then all of a sudden it becomes like the new reality of this is our social experience. This is our way of being a social being with this piece of technology that's sitting in front of us. We've become a lot more comfortable with that. It's never that we were particularly uncomfortable with technology, but we were uncomfortable with virtuality. We used it in a different way, or we used it to a lesser extent. Not everyone, of course, but by the society at large has come somewhat unwilling into this space. Everything we're doing now is screen time. In terms of we're doing our this in terms of interacting with others in work or doing an interview or that sort of thing. So we're doing our work through screen. We're watching movies through screens. We are interacting with our email through screens. We are doing all sorts of social media through screens. So we have become so into the virtual, much more so than we had been previously. We speak more comfortably on camera. We reach out in terms of meetings where we're all around doing the Hollywood Squares version of the office space or that sort of thing. The Partridge Family, was that the one that had the different squares in terms of maybe not, trying to remember the TV show that had that.
The Brady Bunch?
Brady Bunch. There we go. The Brady.
Yeah.
Yep. Brady Bunch and Hollywood Squares, and that's a lot of our meeting space these days.
Yeah.
We're looking at each other doing this sort of stuff. But we have become comfortable in the course of doing that. So when we get to the other side, even if we return back to the office space, we're not going to forget what it's been to actually engage in a virtual space of calling people up and interacting more this way and doing deals more comfortably this way. So there's going to be a transition in terms of that. Now, you mentioned about universities and what does some of this mean for universities. Some of the stuff I've read on that and some of the stuff that I've discussed with people is that there's become a question when you're there and you're during a pandemic and you're paying exorbitant fees. I'm not talking about university terms, but when, say that we're talking about Stanford or Harvard or some other university or school, and you're doing your classes from home, you're paying $50,000. It's like, wow, it's caused some people to really question. What is the experience? What should the experience be? And how can we look at, what university education should be and how it's going to transform? And I think that what we'll see is that some of the large universities with established brands of excellence, and here I am talking about University of Toronto, also talking about Harvard, talking about MIT, talking about Berkeley, people will be drawn to going and taking and getting their experience, their education from these institutions online a little bit more so than maybe has been the case. Some universities will find it harder to justify, and some have taken a real hit in terms of this enrollment, right? There's been a real question for each family and each prospective student about whether to enroll or wait and where to enroll during the pandemic. It certainly has been a bit of a hit on some of the smaller universities and colleges that have struggled greatly, and their ability to withstand this, they too are affected. It means that they've had to cut back. It means that they have had to look at the bottom line on what they're able to offer. It means that they've had to curtail hiring staff and hiring faculty. And when you do that, it brings into question how well you're meeting the challenges that you're setting out for yourself. So some universities are investing quite heavily in terms of online and leveraging the online experience as being something that they can build on. So there's a chance that might not entirely return to what it had been. There's a chance that some of the universities will become more mega universities in terms of their brand, in terms of what they offer, education online and the rest, to the degree that people are willing to do their education that way. The caveat to this, or the flip side, maybe a better way to say it, is shown by the daughter of a friend of mine. It's the pandemic. She was accepted at Harvard. She was not going to do it from home. She's down in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She's in a place and an apartment and doing her courses for the most part online. But she's there because she wants that experience of being there.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something that's a bit more resilient than we know about the desire for the physical experience of the physicality of presence of being at a university or a college that maybe we're not seeing just yet, but might prove itself in the test of time. But there will be some large courses that have come out. There definitely will be. There's some, I tell you, but if we bring it to what I do know a lot more about, or think I do, if we talk about the hub. So the first day when the university closed, I was already online. I had already transferred everything online.
Yes.
It was like I'm not holding back. This is coming. Boom. You can't resist. Why fight what you can't change?
Yeah.
So I was straight in there, and I was setting myself up on Zoom in particular, and getting all sorts of things worked out, and getting events planned and getting people to know about stuff, and totally transferred into being a more virtual space. When we return back to having the space open physically, I am not going to abandon what's been created in terms of the online. There have been benefits, tremendous benefits. The distance between Scarborough and downtown Toronto has been erased. It no longer takes an hour to drive and an hour back to drive back. So we now have participation from people downtown, students downtown, looking at the hub saying, oh, geez, I think this is a good place. I think I want to come to the hub to do what I'm doing. And there's stuff that we're offering online. We're not about to drop that, even though we can return back to physical states. So I'm not saying that we will keep everything online, but chances are we're going to try to maintain both things together, the physical and the virtual together. My advice to companies that are looking to transforming the past is to look at how they can blend exactly that same way. For example, with restaurants, the restaurants that establish themselves that do not have a really healthy, viable takeout, service and menu and the whole thing going, would be doing themselves a severe disservice. Restaurants that think that it's all about the experience of the dining might want to consider, well, we need to keep something else alive alongside, because when we are closed down in a pandemic, closed down, the experience of the dining is not there. We're not paying $100 a plate for the experience of the dining. And I'm not going to pay $100 a plate for the takeout. So the restaurants need to revolutionize a bit, make sure they stay healthy by keeping a more sort of adept of a foot in both spaces kind of way. That's just one example. But what I'm saying is what the hub is doing in terms of a blend, what the universities will be doing as a blend, what restaurants should be doing as a blend. And if we're looking at, as companies move forward, there's opportunity in making sure that we don't just drop everything that we've done now to go back to everything that we were doing, because look where that got us. But look at how we can bring these things together, how we can mold them together and create a much more robust and less fragile economy and experience for everybody. And so this whole thing about virtual work, same thing. The virtual office space, same thing. if people, just kill that and go back to, okay, we're just going to be working in our physical space now like we were before, they'd be making a real mistake, because the companies that are going to be embracing and building the two together will be creating new opportunity in ways that will outperform the old way. And they'll also be resilient to any further change, should it happen, in terms of, God forbid, we have another kind of deal that we have to face. It's like this pandemic. But there are advantages to blending things together. There are advantages to having some aspects of the business remain virtual in terms of how it does its business, how it interacts, how it gets things together for, how does it work with other companies, or how does it merge with others or partner with others or get things working alongside.
Yeah.
So that's what I kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking earlier to another podcast guest who came on. He runs a private college, and he was talking about how he's taken the bet that the change in education is moving to the market's changing, where students it might, like universities, these institutes of learning are going to start looking into a freemium model almost, because the ethereal way that you can do like a course online, right, with very low infrastructure, right, it just changes the balance, because now you're competing for knowledge sources from all across the world. Do I take if I can take AO1 psych at not just University of Toronto, but I can also take it at Harvard. I can also take it at all these different all online for free, right? It suddenly becomes a blended environment, a competition, because once one university puts it for free, all the universities are inclined to open it up, right? And so not just universities, these private colleges. So he's saying that just like a freemium model, just like a social network, or just like those kind of models where you give out the knowledge for free, you teach for free, the students come in for free, but the top of the top, right, get it's like almost like a football team, right? That places will pay the student to attend there, pay for play almost. It's like you're one of the best cream of the crop, we will pay you to be part of this. And the way that the institutions can monetize is corporates and governments paying them a subscription fee almost for the top tier, right? So it's like they're paying forward for 3-4 years down the line to be able to pick for the cream of the crop. And the example he gave was like institutions like the CDL, which you mentioned earlier, right? With the CDL, it's a nonprofit, but founded at the Institute of Rotman, is it charges corporates from investment funds to multinationals $100,000 a year to be part of its network, for the privilege of being able to access the kind of companies that come out of there, right? And that kind of model of thinking for education, he's looking to explore, right? Where corporate players, where people who want the labor pools will pay in advance to foster that kind of knowledge development, right, for the next generation of their talent pool, right? Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you ever see like a university ever pursuing that kind of that model? Do you think it could work?
Well, I don't think that my opinion is necessarily one that matters much on that. So I'm going to respectfully decline to share on that one. My hope is that so you have some courses that makes a lot of sense with. And I could teach my media studies course that way to the world. And we have it prior to the pandemic. There's been things to do with what are called MOOCs, right? This is really, really large courses that are offered, and they offer them out to other universities as well. And that's been part of the business model that's operated there. We also had MIT with their open university concept for a while. So these concepts are there. But what you're talking about is, I'm not sure how I feel about it. Not sure if it will entirely work. One of the things that universities have, of course, a tremendous benefit to doing is when you need a research lab to actually get something, going. Yeah, you need a physical space, and it needs to have some top of the art, state of the art machinery that's in it, some fairly expensive investment that's in it. I don't see the kind of thing that you're talking about as replacing that, but I do see some of the general introductory course type stuff as being that. But I don't know. I think time will tell. One thing that's definitely changing, I think, and I hope, is that the introductory lecture is not going to be read from a podium, that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But you're asking me about things that are kind of outside of my space of knowledge.
It's trying to get into your mind, Gray.
No. I don't know on this one.
Okay.
I really don't. I've heard some of the same things that you've heard, but I really don't know about whether that can work. I do, because I hear about dissatisfaction about people who are taking things from home and taking things on a computer. They want more experience.
Yeah.
There's a value to actually being somewhere, associating with new friends,
Absolutely.
making new friends, and being excited about the exploration of what you're doing. That certainly was part of my university experience. When I talk to university students, though, these days, and I ask them to provide adjectives that go along with their experience, they talk about stress. They talk about the burden of the workload, the anxiety that goes along with needing to succeed, and about how that is such a hard thing for them to deal with. I don't remember that myself as being part of my experience. I'm sure I was stressed when I was doing what I was doing, but I recall being a lot more excited about the learning and just thrilled to be in a new place with new people and just having a lot of excitement about it. So I'm hoping that in my answering your question, what will fight the idea of everything working along the lines of, well, we'll all do stuff online, is that students want a different experience. They don't want the all online stuff. Now, I get the point that you said about, well, if I can take an introductory to psychology course at Harvard, why do I want to take it, at some other college down the road here? I see. I see the point. But underlying it all is, I believe, the desire for the experience of, this is my time in my life to be in a certain place with certain other people, to go through this experience together, to share with those people on this experience, to build this network, and that's vitally important to me. So I'm thinking that will carry forward in a way that will counter the idea of, well, we can just do everything online as the great big, and then be done, and these other places will no. So I taught at Wilfrid Laurier for a short time. That is a university that has tremendous school spirit. I mean, just extraordinary school spirit. And the people that go there with that as sort of a burning passion in their heart. That's what they want to be part of. And that part of their brand works really, really well. So if you're asking, do I think that places like that would fail because people can sign up for the larger courses, and I can take a course out of London School of Economics, I can take another one out of Harvard, I can take one out of Berkeley? Well, sure. I mean, there's some risk to people doing some of that, but I think that if you're focused on your brand for providing student experience, you can maybe survive some of this.
Yeah.
And my AirPods are about to die. One has just kind of died on me. We've gone a good long time here.
Yeah, we went on for quite a bit. I wanted to take the Saturday to do this because traditionally we do film on Wednesdays. We film four at a time, 1 hour each, and I wanted to give like some time for this to unwind. And thank you for your time. And I think we can wrap up here. But I mean, one of the key things I wanted to say was the reason I wanted to do this was really capture the mindset and also the drive behind building the hub, because it's been instrumental for me personally, growing up in that space and spent most of my 20s, mid to late 20s going through the hub experience and working together on a collaborative way to solve complex problems really defined my path forward. And I'm not the only one. I've talked to so many people. I kept in touch with a lot of alumni who came out of the hub, from Axel to Dikshant, and everyone has something to say about how the hub, talking about university experience and like finding a tribe. The hub was the place,
Finding a tribe.
was
Finding a
for
tribe.
that was the tribe for us. And you talked about this being a community. That feeling really lingers. And one of the things I really appreciate for what you have done is to build and cultivate a community of people who otherwise wouldn't have had a place to go, you know, and to really drive support for everything that these people have done, because this community is going on, and like you said, just post COVID, like $5 million worth of value, right? There's all these people who've gone through the hub, gone through this program, gone through this space, who either might go and create other companies, who might work in bigger firms to innovate within themselves, might go into government. Um, my hope is that the hub like continues, like has a long fruitful legacy where it
Okay.
continues to build on top of this. Where past legacy students come back, and creates this kind of fruitful ecosystem, because we need more of this. I mean, this is the kind
Uh,
of.
thanks. Let me say that there have been some champions of the hub, and without them, it wouldn't exist.
Mhm,
The first champion, Andrew Arafuzaman,
of course.
right,
I agree.
was his brainchild to bring this about. So the chief administrative officer of the university. Another champion, my present boss, is Bernie Kratz, the VP research.
Hmm.
And without his support, this wouldn't happen. The hub does not exist without the support, benefit, and appreciation of those who form the university at a very high level. I've been blessed. Now, have I brought something to this to make it work? Well, sure. They've given me somewhat free hand. So, yeah, I do take some credit, of course, in terms of why it's thriving and doing as well as it's done, and of the success that's come through. But I also credit, of course, you, all of you, all of the people that have crossed the threshold to the hub, who have come to explore and to be part of and to just, you know, see what can be done to change the world and fix a problem that really they want to fix and make some money doing it while they're doing it. All that, it's wonderful. So all the pieces have just kind of come together. So yeah, thanks. It's not all me. It's some of me making it work, but I tell you, it's really the people that you surround yourself with too. Right?
Hmm.
And I couldn't possibly end this without mentioning Donovan Dill,
Mm.
who's presently in the hub and phenomenal in terms of how he works with people. And Donovan is, I think he and I share that we are guilty of how we don't walk away, how we don't abandon, how we work with people, and there's that loyalty bond. We do not give up on people, and that's maybe it's a strength and a weakness at the same
Mm.
time. But for the benefit of those that come to the hub, it's by knowing that there's somebody that actually cares. And that is one of the central key pieces that makes the hub different as a space than many incubators. is that the people that operate and run it care. I mean, deeply care about the people that are there and making them successful, making things work, reducing their stress, reducing their anxiety to the greatest degree we can, and having fun doing things
Mm-hmm.
and along the way. So yeah, I think that the hub is kind of unique. I think it's a well-kept secret at the University of Toronto. And I kind of enjoy that
Yeah.
because, like I said, we have 50 companies in the hub right now. If I were to become any more visible, and I think your podcast might do that, but anyway, if I become seriously more visible, I'll have more than I can possibly handle. So part of the success of the hub as well has been the number of startups and companies and entrepreneurs that it is working with. I can't handle 1,000 companies
Mm-hmm.
at one.
Of course.
I can't handle hundreds at one time. Can't. So then it would become a different experience. I would have to be selective. I would have to say who can come in and who can't. As it is now, I try to operate for the University of Toronto Scarborough with those that come with an idea to explore and bring it to my door. And so far, I've been able to operate quite well that way. And the university has stepped up to make that a reality. They've committed. We have a space, we have staff, we have budget, we have results that just speak for themselves. So I don't think that it's disappearing anytime soon. And hopefully we'll continue to have more successes along the way. You, by the way, are one of those successes. And in terms of what you're doing, in terms of the resilience that you represent, in terms of where you brought BlueMax, in terms of what you're doing, in terms of what you've learned on your journey along the way. And you've also taught me, because in watching you succeed in terms of what you're doing, I have, of course, paid attention and drawn from that to understand that there are people that they excel in key areas of entrepreneurship, where if it's aimed in a particular avenue, a particular direction, they can be profoundly impactful and profoundly successful. And that's along the lines of yourself. So anyway, thank you very much for tonight. It's been a pleasure. And,
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Gray, and likewise. Like, I'm super glad we met on that fateful day when I came knocking.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And yeah, definitely. So, thank you again for the time, and everyone. This is 100th episode. This has been great. Thank you, Gray.
Wow. Thank you.